Welcome to episode 4 of the Jet Series NFL podcast. My name is DJ Demerit, and I am once again joined by my favorite co-host, Ian O'Malley and Tyler Smith. How we doing, boys?
Doing good
What's
up
going
here.
on?
You know what? It was St. Patty's Day yesterday. I did get that Shamrock Shake, and obviously the league year officially began. And ready to rock and roll. Talk about some of these deals these teams made.
Absolutely,
Smitty, how are you today?
absolutely. I'm doing great. Looking at all these New England signings, I'm doing fantastic. Real happy with what they're doing, and hopefully they'll make one more splash.
It's funny, you got the Shamrock Shake. I didn't get the beer, so I guess you went up on me for yesterday, but pretty much two-part holiday. We got the start of the league year and St. Patty's Day wrapped up into one. Only got to celebrate one, though.
Yeah, well, plus you got the tournament starting tonight, and then you got the weekend. So, I mean, it's a great week.
Yeah, for some, not for others, but we won't get into that here. You boys New England cleaning up, Smitty. Saw my guys down in Tampa make a couple of signings. And O'Malley, I know you got some guys on the cusp, and you guys just signed, a couple guys. If you guys want to get into that and kind of start with free agency, man. Lots happened in the last 2-3 days, so teams are trying to capitalize. Obviously, kind of put their rosters in the best position to succeed on the field. You got the draft coming up, but a lot of moves have been made this past week so far. I expect a lot more to be made. Do you guys want to weigh in on that? Any comments, concerns? Kind of ratings on how teams have been doing so far as signings and free agency, and take it away.
I think Bill Belichick is just showing you how to dominate free agency. But another thing that he did is take advantage of a odd season, especially in the off season where the cap is lower and a lot of these teams don't have money to spend. Patriots on the opposite had money to spend, so that's exactly what they did. But if you look deeper into these contracts, they're all making low base salaries for year one, which is great. Allows the pass to have more flex cap flexibility, and hopefully they can use that to bring in another guy. I'm looking for another wide receiver. I would have loved Curtis Samuel coming in, but to walk away with Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, that you can't complain as a Pats fan. I was hoping they'd get a little bit more notable receiver, maybe like a Will Fuller, rather than a Nelson Aguilar and a Kendrick Bourne. But there's plenty of opportunity to address that position moving forward.
Well, Belichick has always believed in throwing the ball over the middle of the field, and it's easier to throw the ball over the middle of the field to tight ends than it is to receivers. So that's why, him going after the tight ends made more sense than him going after big-time receivers. And especially they've been somewhat hit and miss over the years with receivers, whereas and the last 2 years have been just flat out whiffs. I mean, they're like a hit. The last 2 years they've been a hitter that goes like 0 for 500 back-to-back years, in baseball. So, with bringing in, but they've always hit on tight ends. They haven't had a tight end come in there and not play well, and since he's been the coach. So, that made sense that he went the direction that he did. It's kind of reminiscent of, his second off season in New England. You go back to 2001. He signed he and Scott Pioli, who was the kind of the GM at the time. Those two guys signed 23 free agents for a combined signing bonus of $2.5 million. And although the free agency bill was a lot higher this year, and they set the record for most guaranteed money ever spent, they didn't throw stupid money at anybody. They didn't throw big money at average players. They threw good money at decent players.
Market value.
They paid proper market value, which is what they do. The only position Belichick's really been willing to overpay for over the years is corner. Darrelle Revis, Stephon Gilmore, and it's worked.
Yep.
But yeah, and they brought in Jalen Mills this year. As you can play corner, you can play safety. Belichick likes versatility. Unless you're a dominant player, which they haven't had too many of those. Even with all the success they've had, unless you're a dominant player, he wants versatility, and that's what Jalen Mills brings. That's what Jonnu Smith, Jonnu Smith is going to be kind of that move tight end. Hunter Henry, is going to be more of that inline blocking Y tight end. And Matthew Judon at outside backer. They needed a pass rusher. And, now you got Dante Hightower coming back. You got Patrick Chung coming back.
They just picked up Kyle Van Noy as well.
Kyle Van Noy coming back. Pretty much 3/4 of the starting linebacking core that you had when you had the number one defense in 2019 is back.
Right.
In fact, in actuality, almost the entire back seven is back.
Except now you've made additions as well.
You've made addition. Well, you lost Jamie Collins,
right,
who was actually the best linebacker that year. But again, Matthew Judon is not too far below Jamie Collins. In fact, his performance over the last few years is probably even more consistent than Jamie Collins. So now what happens with Gilmore remains to be seen, because that's another way, Smitty, to open up some cap flexibility. But, you look at New England, and I thought they were the Chicago Bulls after Michael Jordan left. I wouldn't be surprised if they were a playoff team this year. The defense will be good. I don't know if it'll be 2019 good, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were in the top 10 last year after losing all those guys. So now they'll be in the top 5 defensively. And then you're going to have offensively, they'll be better just with the weapons that they've added. Cam, year 2, he had
still a big question mark.
It's a question mark, but he played better in the second half of the season after having COVID and battling the after effects of COVID. And I think the COVID fog really got him. I think the Patriots were the team that were most impacted by COVID. And I think and I think now kind of moving past that, well, you look at the opt-outs, you look at Cam getting sick, Gilmore missed a couple of games. So I think moving past that, this should be a good team. I don't think they'll be back to winning the AFC Super Bowl contending team, but this should be a good team that'll. But by the way, that should claim a playoff spot, or very easily could claim a playoff spot in a 7-team playoff, especially considering that they were in it till week 15 last year.
Well, go ahead, sir.
I'm just going to say I'm not going to jump the gun and call them Super Bowl contenders, but I think they have a legit chance to contend with the Bills for the AFC East, especially if Cam Newton can play well.
Yeah, I think Cam's an X factor, and I think we talked about the NFC West last week and how 2 teams might very well be 3 teams. I'm sorry, might very well be coming out of that division. We could see the same thing in the AFC East. I mean, it really depends how that division unfolds. We said Miami's going to be a strong team. We've said Buffalo's going to be a strong team again. I think New England kind of comes out of the aforementioned grave here. And, we talked about this for those of you at home, nobody knows this, but we did a dry run and we ended up talking about New England for most of it. And O'Malley had first said, I don't think they're going to be back to the same New England team they were before. And I kind of made an argument where if they can get, X, Y, and Z to happen, I think it might be a 10-6, maybe an 11-5 team. Obviously, Smitty's a diehard New England fan, so he sees it that way to an extent. But this just, this free agency spree just kind of brought up a lot of questions now, because we don't know who's coming out of that division. You still got, Baltimore and Cleveland are the teams to be reckoned with in the AFC North. You got KC. We'll see we'll see if Vegas makes a push this year. And you pretty much got Tennessee. So with the 7-game playoff bracket you got going on now, I wouldn't be surprised to see 3 teams come out of one division. And right now, with this free agency pickup list, I think New England's a shoo-in for the 3rd team in that division. That could be the division that sends 3.
And I think one thing you got to look at too is, especially with Belichick, he historically dominates young quarterbacks. Well, you look at the AFC East, Tua is young. They're almost definitely, Miami's almost definitely not getting Deshaun at this point, based on the things he said a couple of days ago. Tua's young, all right? And then the Jets are going to have probably Zach Wilson be their quarterback. So I'd say that's 3 wins right there. Then plus you have to understand New England's not going to make mistakes that other teams make. So they're going to win games on coaching. and just playing sound fundamental football that other teams are going to lose. You know, I don't, off the top of my head, I know they play the NFC South this year. Other than Tampa, that's a relatively weak division now. I mean, because New Orleans, you just don't know what their cap situation. They've lost guys. Breeze is gone. How good is Jameis? Atlanta, new coach. Matt Ryan, I like, but new coach. And then Carolina's rebuilding. And then, Smitty, do you know who they play in the AFC? I think they have.
They play the AFC South.
They play the AFC South.
Yes.
That's a kooky
And
division.
they also have KC and Pitt. You know, two teams they usually face every year anyway.
But regardless of what the schedule is, they're going to win games that other teams would normally lose. That's kind of where that's kind of where I see them possibly having a good season. You know, I mean, like we said, playoffs are not out of. Last year I thought playoffs were definitely out of the question. Until Monday, I thought playoffs were definitely out of the question. Now, it's not only it's definitely in the question. Now, a lot of people think that they can go back, including us here. There's still one more thing that I think they have to do, and that's find a long-term answer at quarterback. You know, and with Belichick, you can never count out what move he's going to make, because he could swing a trade in a draft. I mean, obviously, no one wants to help him out, but he could swing a trade in a draft, move up, and get any one of the 5 guys. Heck, he might even like Kyle Trask, and know that he could get him in the second round.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think, you know, he's always a guy who stockpiles draft picks. You know, they do have some tradable pieces on the team. So if he wanted to make a run at Deshaun Watson, why not?
He could do it.
Why not try it? Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't rule that out.
With the Nick Caserio connection there as well, I don't know if the Texans want to trade Deshaun Watson into the AFC or keep him in the AFC. I wouldn't, but you know, if the compensation's there, if you're Nick Caserio, you got to do it. Well, especially if the kid doesn't want to play for the team.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's going to be compensation. It's going to be, what is Houston's return on investment? Is it sizable enough to where we can make this trade and go to sleep at night? Or if we trade him in the AFC, did we do it at a high enough value? I think especially that, you know, it's a very touchy situation with Caserio being there now. You make a trade with Belichick that looks a little lopsided or seems to be not too heavily in your favor. It might look like a little collusion there to an extent. And I'm not, you know, not saying anybody's guilty of that or doing so, but just how it appears to the media and how that could have a negative impact on perception of what's going on as well. But, you know, talk about Deshaun Watson. We've been talking about him for about 3 weeks now. We're seeing the quarterback carousel spinning here, right? We got, Tyrod Taylor in Houston. Ryan Fitzpatrick just went to, was it Washington?
Washington.
And then Andy Dalton in Chicago. Who didn't Chicago just make a trade offer? You want to get into that? Russell Wilson. What was that?
Yeah, so a report came out that the Bears aggressively pursued Russ Wilson, and they offered three first-round picks, a third-round pick, and 2 starters, and Seattle told them they were not going to trade him at this time. And, you know, I think Seattle did the right thing. You're not just going to trade the guy because he, you know, quote unquote, you know, isn't happy with you. So, you know, I think he sticks around in Seattle now that, especially with Andy Dalton going to Chicago. Dak Prescott signing an extension with Dallas. Jameis Winston signing back with the Saints. You know, that's 3 of his teams that he wanted to go to that, you know, probably aren't going to trade him. I can see the Saints maybe trading for him, but they got a bad cap situation.
And they just paid Taysom Hill.
And they just paid, you know, quote, they essentially paid Taysom Hill. He's really not going to see any of that money, but, you know, yeah. You know, they got 2 guys that can play quarterback on the team. Now you look at one more team he could go to, Las Vegas. They just dismantled their offensive line, so I don't know why. What attracts him to go there?
Nothing now except injury. End of your career early.
Yeah, I mean, and plus, you know, if one of his problems in Seattle is that, you know, he doesn't like how Pete Carroll runs the show. Well, when you play for Chucky, he runs the show. You know what I mean? He runs the show offensively from top to bottom. So he's not going to have he'd have less say in Las Vegas than he does in Seattle. One thing I think Russell Wilson, I hope he learns through this, is tension happens in life. That when you work with somebody long enough, you're not always going to see eye to eye. You're not going to get along with everybody, and every little thing kind of just adds up over a certain point in time, and then it just blows over. And especially people for years had called out Russell Wilson for kind of pushing everything down and always saying, go Hawks, go Hawks, go Hawks. And then eventually the lid blew off and he wasn't going to say go Hawks anymore. Look, is Seattle a perfectly run team? No. All right. Executives around the league can't figure out why they draft the way they do. The offensive line is since they traded Max Unger has not been as good. All right. And the defense isn't what it's been since the Legion of Boom left, but it never was going to be because they were one of the greatest defenses ever. So, yeah, so it's not perfect, but you've had a winning season every year you've been in the league. You go to the playoffs all but 1 year, and almost every year you go into the season saying Seattle's a chance to go to the Super Bowl. You're not going to get much better than that in a lot of places. And the places where you could do better than that, they already have quarterbacks. So you're just stay in Seattle, make it work with Pete Carroll. You have Shane Waldron now as the offensive coordinator. He runs that that Shanahan McVay system, that zone stretch, outside zone bootleg offense. All right, and that's so a lot of the best offenses in the league are running that now. Green Bay led the league in offense. They run it. Tennessee was third. They run it. Cleveland, they were in the top half of the league offensively. That's what they run. Minnesota runs it. They've had success. So, that's a good offense to be running. Schematically, you're in a better offense now than you were in. Going back to the Raiders, if I'm Pete Carroll, my number one guy I need to sign right now is Rodney Hudson at center. Because if you get center fixed, you're going to have a top 5 or top 10 center in the league. You got Dwayne Brown as a top 10 left tackle, and Damian Lewis looks pretty good at right guard. Left tackle, center, and right guard. You're now set. You're not going to have a great offensive line, but you'll have a good offense, a better offensive line than what you've had. You'll have a good offensive line, and now you're not getting hit as much. The other thing is, look, with Russell, he's going to get hit because he holds on to the ball a lot, tries to make plays. But he shouldn't have been sacked 400 times in the last 9 years.
No, and we'll know if they're what's going on with Russ as we track their progress as far as making offensive line signs during this free agency period right now and how they draft as well. But we talked about that before. That's something you really have to do if you want Russell Wilson to stay in Seattle. Not to get too off topic, but nowadays we see it in sport, all throughout, and especially in football when it comes to disagreements or franchise tags or wanting to be traded, and players will sit out. That money means a lot less to them than the principle at hand. So when you're talking big names like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, like those are a couple of guys you can't piss off. You have to come to terms. You have to kind of rekindle whatever relationship issues you're having, and you need to go to work, because if not, you're going to be watching these guys sit in the sidelines during the season. It's going to be too late to trade them, and they're not getting paid, and nobody wants that. So I think right now Seattle's kind of on the right track. You got guys in Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, where it's not like you have a shortage of weapon at receiver. So I'll be interested to see what they do. And I'm interested to see kind of who ends up where from the quarterback's perspective too, because no news on Deshaun Watson yet. We've been covering this for 3 weeks. We still got no news on where he's going, where he might end up. And again, Miami just ended up with Jacoby Brissett. So kind of slow, that window's kind of closing on where he might go, especially with New York. You just said they're probably going to end up drafting Justin Fields too. So this whole thing is a while. I'm sorry, you're right. Zach Wilson slipped my mind. So this whole thing's kind of up and no one knows what's going on anywhere. But in the meantime, enjoying these free agent signings and, seeing teams kind of restructure and reorganize. And, some teams that might not have had a shot, like you said, to make the playoffs, like New England, we're seeing back into that picture. Who else? Who else has done a great job in free agency where you think, their roster value has, increased significantly or at least a little bit over the last 2 days? Just on paper.
I'm gonna mention one, and it's gonna be the Washington football team. They bring in Fitzmagic, who's a fantastic leader, fantastic, locker room guy, and he can come in and sling the ball, and he's gonna come in and put his body on the line to do whatever it takes to win. He's throwing to Logan Thomas. You have Antonio Gibson. He's throwing to Terry McLaurin, and now he's throwing to Curtis Samuel, who they signed last night. And they signed William Jackson, a DB, to a defense that is already one of the better ones in the league. So I look at this Washington team who's got a great coaching staff by Ron Rivera, who's really embracing a culture change with everything that, surrounded them, this past offseason with, Snyder and their team name and stuff. So I'm excited for Washington. I'm excited to see, how that team comes out and play because they do have some players on that team. And that's going to be a good team, especially in a division that has a lot of question marks.
They do look like they could be a good team moving forward, but I actually didn't like the Fitzmagic move because I just don't see the upside to it.
I do.
Because the guy that I actually wanted them to go after and I think would be a fit for Ron Rivera is Sam Darnold. Now, Ryan Fitzpatrick has been a better quarterback in the NFL than Sam Darnold has. I think that goes without saying. But at least with Sam, I see more upside. Whereas Fitzmagic, he is what he is. He's gonna throw it to your team. He's gonna throw it to the other team. He's gonna have some great wins. He's gonna have some awful losses. But for a team and Sam's kind of that way too. Like Sam, don't get me wrong, Sam's reckless. But one of the things that Sam has never had, even going back to college, was he never had structure. USC has been a mess. The Jets have been a mess. And now we're looking at a guy who most people thought was the number one quarterback in his draft and saying he was a bust. And there was a coach who came out yesterday or 2 days ago in the AFC, I think in the AFC, who said that Sam stinks. Has he stunk as an NFL player? You could say that. Do I think that he stinks as a quarterback? Do I think his potential stinks? No, not at all.
Not at all. You were high on him coming out of the draft, obviously.
I wanted the Giants to take him. In fact, I still wish the Giants took him over Saquon. But again, we can't go back and change that. But I think with Ron Rivera being a very strong head coach, which again Sam has never had, I think that would put Sam in a structure. I think that would allow Sam to succeed. Because and I compare Sam to Ryan Tannehill because, by the way, who was Ryan Tannehill's last head coach in Miami?
Adam Gase.
Adam Gase. Who did Sam just have? Adam Gase. And then
and you're kind of pulling at straws here looking at Sam Darnold, though, right? Because you don't know what he's capable of because he hasn't had the institution to see. He's never played under somebody credible to that effect. You don't know when you're Ron Rivera, you might be gambling the next 3-4 years away, saying we're going to pay this man because we think he can play, and if he can't, I'd rather go with the 1-year option in Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Well, Sam's only a 1-year option.
Okay, well that changes the game a little bit, but
well, Sam, because listen, because this is the year that the Jets have to pick up his 5th-year option.
Okay.
They're not going to do so because they're going to draft Zach Wilson. So, if I'm Washington, I look at it and say this: I go get Sam Darnold. I put him. He's essentially in a 1-year prove-it deal. All right, and then if it works out, great, and if not, we won the division last year, so we're not on the hot seat. And I can just go get another quarterback next year because, as we've now seen, you can just get quarterbacks now. You can't just get great ones,
but you can get quarterbacks.
Get them.
And I think, but back to the main point, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick's a good quarterback to go get. Somebody who, if he had stuck as number one guy in Miami last year, Miami probably would have been in the playoff spot. Arguably outplayed Tua for what it's worth in that regard as well. And you look at
he's more electric than Tua.
He was, and again, it was his first year in the league, so not giving him any discredit in that to that effect. But you look at you ranked AFC East quarterbacks last year. You had Fitzpatrick probably played better than everybody but Allen. You had Cam Newton in and out. You had Brian Hoyer. You had Stidham.
I thought Tua was better than people gave him credit for.
I think he was number 3. I think you go Allen, Fitz, Tua, and then Patriots, Jets quarterbacks. But even still, you know what you're getting from Ryan Fitzpatrick for the 1 year that he's going to be in your locker room. I think that's enough to say, well, we can probably still do other things. We might be able to get Kyle Trask in the second round if New England doesn't grab him. Mac Jones might still be on the board. How are we going to now structure our team? But also thinking back to, looking back at Houston for a second, Tyrod Taylor just went to Houston. Is he a viable starter? Is he a guy they're going to keep as a number 2 quarterback, as a backup on their bench? So does that mean Darnold's still going to be used as trade bait? Is there still a chance Deshaun Watson ends up in New York? We don't know. So I think in the now and then, not best guy available, but someone we can depend on. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick's a good go-to guy for Washington, like you said, coming off a playoff spot and winning that division. In ugly fashion
teams respond to Fitzpatrick well. He's a good locker room guy. He's a good veteran to have. He's been all over the league. He comes in, works his ass off, he leaves it all out on the field. But like Ian, you said, he does have some ugly games, and when he has some ugly games, they're really ugly.
And that's
like
not
three interceptions a game,
And that's not to say that Sam hasn't had his ugly games, because he has. But I just like the upside factor with Sam, and especially because even if it doesn't work, you have a landing spot. If you're Washington, you have a division title to fall back on. And again, it's only a 1-year deal, so you can go get another guy next year if need be. So that's kind of where I look at it that way, because here's the other thing, right? When you make a big move, which obviously bringing in a quarterback's a big move, whether it's a starter or a backup. When you make a big move, what are the teams that you're competing against the closest saying about it? Right. So in this case, what are the teams in the NFC East saying about it? If I'm Dallas, I'm feeling like we're winning the division easily this year. Because even if Sam was going to Washington, remember, the one time Sam has faced the Cowboys in his career is the game he came back from mono and he played one of his better games as a pro. And they beat the Cowboys, and the Jets won their first game of the year. So, at least kind of there's that in the back of Jerry Jones's mind. Whereas, Fitzmagic, you look at it, it's like you're not changing anything about how I think. Even if I'm the Giants, I look at it and I say, look, we beat Washington twice last year. And Fitzmagic, I mean, we put interceptions galore off of Washington quarterbacks, and Fitzmagic has a penchant for throwing interceptions. So,
yeah, and I don't want to harp on this too long. This Fitzpatrick over Darnold, but I will say I think it's different from the level of consistency you had at quarterback in Washington this time last year. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick played better than Carson Wentz did out of Philadelphia. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick played better than all the Dallas backups last year. And I think Ryan Fitzpatrick played as good, if not better, than Daniel Jones last year.
He definitely played better than Daniel Jones.
I'm saying based on last year's, he's the best quarterback in the NFC East right now, just based on last year alone. I mean, obviously, Dak.
You think Dak is better, though,
right? But we don't know. Again, talk to me like I'm 5. We haven't seen Dak play in almost a year, or what will be almost a year by the time he gets back on the field. So, but moving right along, and another point I wanted to make real quick: Jacksonville just signed Marvin Jones, and then they got Shaq Griffin over from Seattle as well. What do you think, boys? You got Trevor Lawrence most likely expected to, almost definitely coming over to the squad in April. So what's next on their agenda? How do they?
I like what Urban's doing, because he's kind of taking the Belichick model of paying decent players good money, or good players decent money, or whatever way you want to phrase it. He's playing good players what they're worth and not overpaying for them. And Marvin Jones been a good player on dysfunctional teams.
Yep.
And with Urban, his programs are consistent. Shaq Griffin, that's Shaquille. That's a good get at corner. I don't know if he's a true number one corner, but he definitely has experience being a number one corner. Now you have CJ Henderson there, who they drafted last year in the top 10. So now you have two talented players at corner, which every defense needs. All right, you're going to get Trevor Lawrence, and he's going to have people to throw to with Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, who they drafted last year in the second round, and DJ Chark, who can play.
Yeah.
And then
he's kind of been a little quiet recently, but
he's been a little quiet. But again, the quarterback play hasn't been good there, so we don't even know how good he really is.
Right.
And by the way, James Robinson on a bad team at 1,000 yards as a running back, which is hard to do. So especially in the modern era, so get the offensive line a little bit better, and that'll be a pretty good team on offense. Defensively, they're building the way that they're building a way that a lot of defenses like the built, which is having two good players at corner. I almost look at it as Urban's kind of following the Belichick model, and Urban and Belichick are very close. Not as close as Saban and Belichick, but Urban and Belichick are very close. So I think Urban, before he came to the league, did his due diligence and kind of asking around how to build a roster. Plus, another person Urban Meyer is very close to is Jimmy Johnson. And I talked about Jimmy Johnson last week because he was Hall of Fame coach, obviously. But what his strength, he had two strengths as a coach: motivation and personnel. And so are Urban's. Urban, he's a great motivator, and he is obviously was an excellent recruiter, not just at Ohio State and Florida, but also at Utah and Bowling Green in the early parts of his head coaching career.
Yeah, I love the Marvin Jones signing. You're giving Trevor Lawrence, presumably Trevor Lawrence, weapons to come in and, be able to throw the ball in, which was probably going to be a heavier pass offense. So yeah, you're bringing in these guys on probably below market value deals, and and you got a ton of draft picks. You're not overspending. You get a ton of draft picks. So yeah, I like what Jacksonville's doing. Another team that I like what they're doing is the 49ers, beefing up their offensive line by retaining Trent Williams and signing center Alex Mack. How do you stop Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd from the Rams, and then how do you stop the tandem of J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones, by beefing up your offensive line?
Yeah, I wonder, Smitty, and I wonder what you think about this. Do you think San Francisco is just always going to be cheap at quarterback? I know the Jimmy G contract wasn't cheap when they signed it, but it's very cheap now.
I mean, I guess I don't think they'll always go cheap, because I think if they should be in a position where they can go and acquire Deshaun Watson. So no, I don't think they'll always be cheap, but I think they're gonna roll with Jimmy G. If they don't land Watson, they're gonna roll with Jimmy G before they bring in, a rookie. I think.
Because I wouldn't be surprised they draft a guy at 12 if Trey Lance is still sitting there.
Oh, absolutely. If someone's still sitting there, absolutely. I don't think they're gonna.
I don't think he'll get Mac Jones. I think he would just stick with Jimmy G and have him be the guy.
Yeah, I think so. Unless they get offered, good compensation for Jimmy G, where they look at it and they're just like, yeah, we'll do a bridge option this year.
What you got for us here?
So, look, obviously we talked about Deshaun a lot. And so Deshaun, he came out on Tuesday night and he said that San Francisco and Denver are now the two teams he wants to go to. San Francisco, as we talked about it, they might have the cap space available, but that's a very good roster. And I don't know if they want to take away from that roster to get Deshaun. They could. I wouldn't be against it, but, we'll see. If I'm Denver and you swung and missed for every quarterback since Peyton Manning has left, and actually before Peyton Manning got there, you had swung and missed on just about every quarterback since John Elway had retired. So if I'm the Broncos, I do everything I can to get to get Deshaun Watson. I don't know if you guys ever saw the episode of Family Guy where Peter got those Feety pajamas. But what he says in the store when he sees them, he goes up to the store clerk and he says, "Sir, write any number down on this piece of paper and I will pay it." And if I'm Denver, that's the attitude I have to have in order to get Deshaun Watson.
Well, yeah, because
Especially-
Denver's not a historically bad franchise. I think they always have a steady. For the most part, their defense is always playing okay football.
Toughest place to play in the AFC historically.
That as
And-
well.
Right.
But just real quick, I'm not sure what's so attractive about Denver if you're Deshaun Watson, because
Weapons.
now you got to go play Patrick Mahomes twice a year. Justin Herbert, who looked fantastic last year, you got to go play him twice a year. With, I don't understand why
that
you
would
want
be
to go to
a
Denver.
shootout in
It would be a great
AFC
division,
West.
but I don't understand. I don't see what attracts you there. If you're Watson.
They have weapons there, so
They do,
you know what I mean.
but they don't have a Tyreek Hill. They don't have
No, they don't.
No, but you got the draft coming up, and what's Denver picking? Is it 4?
11th.
No,
11th.
No, Denver's not 11th. The Giants are 11th. I think Denver's
13,
Is it-
9.
I believe
They might be 9
I
or
thought
8.
it was a
They're
single
up there.
digit number last time I looked. I could be wrong.
All right, but anyway, I mean, Deshaun Watson becomes your first round pick, and who's better than any first round pick you're going to get?
You're gonna get, yeah.
So, and
But
plus, you can't have the least talented quarterback in the division.
Well,
Now, if Denver gets Deshaun Watson, that puts pressure on Chucky to move off Derek Carr, because then Derek Carr becomes the least talented quarterback in the division. He becomes the worst quarterback in the division, which is the best worst quarterback in any division I've ever seen.
yeah.
Easily.
I will say that. I will agree with you on that one. Division full of quarterbacks. I think you add Deshaun Watson in the mix, you're talking some good games to watch. That division becomes a lot more fun to watch with Deshaun Watson over there.
Yes. All right. And so the other point I want to make is, we've talked about a lot of the good moves teams made. And, obviously we went back and forth on Washington. Should they have gone after Fitzmagic? Should they have gone after Darnold? Obviously Fitzmagic's a safer bet. Darnold has a little bit more upside. But speaking of Sam Darnold, the team that he's still technically a part of, the New York Jets, you can, and look, I'm not a Jets fan, but my grandpa, who I was very close to, may he rest in peace, he was a Jets fan. And I still root for the Jets on Sundays every week when they're not playing the Giants. You can change the owner, you can change the general manager, you can change the coach, you can change the uniform, you can change the players. It's still the same old Jets. I mean, they throw big money at they throw big money at people that shouldn't be getting big money. 2018 and 2019, they set the record in both years for most guaranteed money spent on free agents that the Patriots just broke this year. And obviously with the Jets, I mean, they don't have very many wins to show for it. I think they won 4 games in 2018 and won 7 games somehow in 2019. And then I thought, until they beat the Rams in Week 15, I thought they were the worst NFL team I'd ever seen. And I didn't think that was an exaggeration either. But, and I know free agency, and I know, look, this happens in free agency every year where guys get paid money they shouldn't be getting paid. But Carl Lawson being the highest paid edge rusher in the league, I didn't know that Carl Lawson was better than TJ Watt. The good teams and the good organizations show fiscal responsibility in free agency. Yes, yeah. New England had a lot of cap space. They spent more money than you, but they spent less money on more good players. And their roster was better than yours to begin with. And their coach is better than yours. And their owner's better than yours. So, and then you look at Corey Davis. You're not in the. You're obviously moving on from Sam, but you can't find anybody to take him. You're going to draft Zach Wilson, who's a skinny kid from the Mountain West, who hasn't played as well against better teams. By the way, quarterbacks like that have played well in the league in recent years. Josh Allen, but Josh Allen's not skinny. Josh Allen's a big dude.
Yeah, he is.
He might be skinny for 6'5", but he's a big dude. Zach Wilson's not. And you have maybe the 3 best defensive head coaches in the league in your division, with Bill Belichick, Sean McDermott, and Brian Flores. So the Jets are pretty much just dooming themselves to. They're dooming themselves to another bad year. And New York football fans and New York sports fans in general, because very few of the teams have been good in recent years, they're getting fed up with it. And I'm getting fed up with it. But no, and I do not say this lightly, no team has to get one position right this year more than the New York Jets have to get it right at quarterback. And it's the same position that Cincinnati was in last year, although there was an obvious number one pick for them in Joe Burrow. I say it's more similar to, they're in the same position Cleveland was in when they drafted Baker Mayfield and in the years leading up to them drafting Baker Mayfield. If they don't get it right, the franchise might as well no longer exist.
Well, I mean, had the XFL, we could have shipped them out to. We were talking about it before. We wish there were a little bit of relegation in the NFL so you could get, get a little bit of consistency across the level of play there. But no, to your point exactly, I think the Jets need to play. They need to, they need to be responsible for playing good football, but it's also who they bring in. You could see it unfold a few different ways, right? They have the number 2 pick. If they're sold on Darnold and they pick up his 5th-year option, we can trade that number 2 overall pick, trade down, see if we can get 2 first-rounders and draft receiver. We can try to do something at the skill position like that. If we're taking the best guy on the board and we need a quarterback, we're not sold on Darnold. We're taking Fields. It's still not too late to trade Houston, that overall pick plus picks, plus Darnold, plus whatever for Deshaun Watson. So we don't even know what New York's war room is looking like right now. I'm sure we're going to see that unfold in the next 4 weeks. You got the draft in 5. Is it 5 weeks from today, I believe?
5 or 6.
5 or 6. Okay, from today, because the 18th,
it's March 18th,
St. Patty's Day. So I mean, look, I'm excited to see what they do. It would, again, the same reason I stopped rooting for New England when I was a New England fan. For all those of you at home that already know that, was because of the level of who we were playing every week. We were playing Buffalo twice. I've been into it. Miami twice, and New York twice. I don't like that New York is now that team where it's okay. Buffalo could take their shots and get 2 easy wins. Miami can get 2 easy wins, and now New England is playing well again, is going to be able to get 2 easy wins. No, if that team was a 6-10 team, it's a different ball game. It kind of changes the dynamic of the division. That's what I'm looking for. I like good football. I like when there are more than 3 good teams in a division, and you have somebody who's not read out. All right, so I'd like to see New York win 6 games. I'd like to see them give New England, Buffalo, and Miami a problem at some point in time. More than likely, they're not going to. So this draft pick and what they do, again, in 5-6 weeks, what they do with Houston between now and then, that's going to really determine where they're at as a franchise and if they can actually win, more than 2 games going forward. So I'm interested to see that.
I'd like to see the Jets win all their games, except for when they play the Giants. So, I mean, yeah, if the Jets won 6 games this year, that would be fun. It would almost feel the same way as when the Giants won 6 games last year, that they're heading in the right direction. They got the right coach. They, some of the guys you can see as building blocks. And I think they have a couple of building blocks on that team. I like the left tackle, Mekhi Becton. I like the defensive tackle, Quinnen Williams. I like the free safety, Marcus May. That's where it stops. So they need more than 3 good players.
Yeah. But
I agree.
They do it. I think the Jets are, regardless of what the Jets roster looks like, they're already in a better shape now that they have Robert Saleh, as the head coach. You got rid of Gase. You shouldn't even hired Adam Gase. I don't even know why they did that, but now you got Robert Saleh. And even if they choose to go with Darnold, I think Darnold has a better chance to succeed with Robert Saleh. Well, obviously, than he did with Adam Gase. But if the Jets are going to go QB at 2, they need to get rid of Darnold right away because his value is only going down, and there's teams that'll trade for him. So.
Well, I'll finish my last point off. Is I think it's kind of wise to keep Darnold. If you're not going to get rid of him for Deshaun, I think you keep him to have a quarterback controversy and a competition in that locker room. give.
Yeah, but
Justin
if you're gonna spend your second pick on a QB, just bring him in now and just let him start. You're spending the number 2 overall pick on him. Throw him in and just let him sink or swim.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of getting back, they could have done that in LA with Justin Herbert. They didn't. They could have done that with Tua. They didn't. And I mean, Justin Herbert looked good, when it was all said and done. But again, teams usually kind of elect to. I don't get it either, but they kind of elect to go with the guy that's actually proven himself versus the guy that they just spent a high-end draft pick on. I agree. You let him play. Let him play. If you're gonna bring in Justin Fields, you got to let him play. But again, I like that sense of competition because you know where he's at. Ian and I have talked about it time and time again from a coaching perspective. When guys know they have a job, they don't work as hard. And I don't think that's going to be the case with Justin Fields coming into the league. You're getting paid a lot of money to play this game. Guys don't work as hard knowing they have that comfort behind them of, I'm not losing this job unless I'm injured, I die, or somebody else we trade for because I'm not doing well, and that's not my problem at this particular moment in time. So we'll see how it unfolds, and hopefully we get the news to where we can cover this on the podcast next week. I really want to know what's going on in Houston, why they just got Mark Ingram and Tyrod Taylor. I really want to know what's going on.
Mark Ingram's a good locker room guy. They're trying to build a new culture. That's
a good place to start. But do you guys have anything else to add to the pod for this week?
No, I think I guess one last thing. Kenny Galladay with the Giants coming up shortly. I mean, I've said it a million times in this podcast so far. Their biggest need is wide receiver. So, Kenny Galladay, I would hope to fill that need. But again, I hope they don't do what the Jets usually do, which is overpay people.
Right.
So, last year I thought the Giants were very smart in free agency. They paid good players good money. James Bradbury, Blake Martinez, they just gave $20+ million a year to Leonard Williams, but he had 11.5 sacks last year, and I like keeping that front middle back of the defense intact. So, sometimes you're gonna have to overpay a little bit, but just one thing I'll say, Dave Gettleman, if you're watching, just please be responsible.
And they just got John Ross too, so hopefully Galladay comes over and you got 2 more receivers to add to that room. But we got the message, Mr. Gettleman, out there somewhere. All right, guys. Well, hey, thank you all for tuning in to episode 4 of the Jet Series NFL podcast.